Hello everyone, welcome back to our next set of notes for this week. A bit of a heavy set of notes here, both in terms of how much we have to cover and in terms of the sensitivity of what we have to cover. It is important that we still talk about it though. It is a part of history and it's something that we need to learn about and make sure we don't forget. It's very important. Um, let's go ahead and dive right in. You may have noticed from our World War II notes, the video before this, that we left off something that is usually a really huge part of World War II. And that's because I wanted to make sure that we made sure we focused on it in an appropriate way instead of kind of two slides and done in World War II notes. So we're going to cover the Holocaust in these notes, and we're also going to talk about other human groups that were affected by World War II, sometimes general, sometimes much smaller groups. We will begin with the Holocaust. The Holocaust is the term for basically the large-scale negative effects of World War II on European Jews. And by far, this is the group that is most severely affected by World War II. As we mentioned in our World War II notes, Adolf Hitler rise to power. He puts the blame on other people to help alleviate some of the kind of bitterness and stress and kind of give his push to power some speed there. The group of people that he chooses to blame are the Jewish people. This is what we call anti-Semitism. It's underlined here at the bottom. Anti-Semitism is hatred and prejudice towards Jewish people. That can be, words, that can be actions, it can be physical violence, etc. It's basically racism, except specifically towards Jewish people. So we call anti-Semitism. A lot of people ask me, why the Jewish people? It feels a little random. We haven't really mentioned them too much throughout our study of United States history, a little bit in our World I and World II. So where did this come from? Unfortunately, anti-Semitism, feelings against Jewish people, have been appearing in history repeatedly for like thousands of years. I just got done finishing a video for my World I, my freshman, in which we talk about the Black Death. And after the Black Death starts to calm down, we see a rise in physical attacks and even things that might be labeled massacres on Jewish people because people in the Dark Ages thought that Jewish people caused the Black Death, that God was punishing the earth because Jewish people existed. And that's in the 1300s, okay? The 1320s is about when we see the rise of the Black Death most severely. So it's been around for a while. It's definitely not something new. He's kind of pulling on a traditional hatred and prejudice found in Europe, but also around the world, unfortunately. So it wasn't like, it didn't take a lot of convincing to blame the Jews, unfortunately. Violence breaks out very early on, even prior to what we usually classify as the Holocaust. And a specific piece of evidence of that would be Kristallnacht. My German isn't very good, so I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing that well. But it translates to Night of Broken Glass. And this was a night early on, very early on, in the kind of flow of events where Jewish homes, Jewish businesses and residences were broken into, robbed, sometimes torched. No, I don't want to do updates. Sometimes burnt down, sometimes violence towards Jewish people, right? Being beaten, being physically assaulted, having their belongings taken, etc. And you can see here, obviously, night of broken glass, right? Referring to, storefronts and windows and such being broken and being burnt. And this was just vandalism against only Jewish homes and businesses. So making a very clear point here, and expressing this kind of misplaced anger in a not so good way. Things really start to step up the pace, unfortunately, when Hitler creates his plan to solve all of Germany's problems, and he calls it his final solution. It's Hitler's final solution, and that is such a threatening name. Very, very creepy. And this basically, his goal was to really get rid of Jewish people, period. Not just Jewish people in Germany or just Jewish people in Europe. Jewish people, period. And there were a number of steps to that plan. In the beginning phases of Hitler's final solution, Jewish people were moved from their home. They were forced to leave their homes and move into the poorer parts of town where they could be basically corralled. They were kept under guard. They couldn't leave the ghetto unless they had it's called a ghetto, by the way. I don't think I said that. All right, it's called the ghetto. No, I'm not joking. They had to have a permission slip from a non-Jew in order to be able to leave the ghetto for work or such. And these are not good places to be. They are, like I said, the poor parts of town. They are unsafe. They are rundown buildings. They are not enough places to sleep. There are not enough meals to go around. And of course, they're not being treated well by the German guards who are keeping an eye on them. So already we see things are not going super well. The next step is to move Jews to concentration camps. So they were moved out of these ghettos into kind of just camps. I feel like it sounds like such a positive thing. I feel like it's fun, but these are literally the farthest thing from fun. The concentration camps were usually found in countrysides of heavily controlled German areas, so obviously the main part of Germany, as well as Poland and Austria. Those were pretty heavily under German control at that point. Many Jewish people did try to escape prior to this, but as I said before, anti-Semitism, hatred against Jewish people, was a pretty common thing, and many countries didn't want to accept Jewish people because they didn't want any Jewish people in their country, or didn't want more Jewish people in their country. And so it was very difficult for families to escape and find other countries that would give them travel visas or refugee visas, because people didn't want Jewish people there. They didn't want to have more Jewish people in the country. So that's a bit of a tricky thing, and we'll see how that kind of ends up at the end of the war. But anyway, so concentration camps, obviously, like I said, not good places to be. They are, again, not well kept, dirty, dangerous, poor hygiene, poor medical care, not enough food, malnutrition, as well as blatant methods of killing, which we'll unfortunately look at. Usually on concentration camps, they were forced to work in some capacity. Some concentration camps had factories there where they would produce some sort of military, item. They might be farming or other types of kind of menial labor, hard labor. Some of the more infamous concentration camps, we talked about the word infamous before. We have Dachau and Auschwitz-Birkenau. There are a couple of camps in the Auschwitz series. I don't know the word I'm looking for here. There are a couple of different Auschwitz camps, but at a couple like nearby locations. Auschwitz-Birkenau was one of the worst. There were approximately 1 million deaths at these camps alone. These 2 camps listed on your screen, 1 million deaths. It's a lot of death, unfortunately. I have a picture of the entrance to Auschwitz when we get to our pictures that I have. Jewish people were actually not the only people included in Hitler's final solution, although they were the main focus. Hitler also sent other groups of people to concentration camp, including Poles, which is the abbreviation form of Polish people, Slavs, people from Slavic countries, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Slovenia, Yugoslavia. I don't think that's a country anymore. People with disabilities were sent to concentration camps. So anybody with a physical disability or a severe mental disability, they were sent. Sometimes elderly people were sent, and anybody who was openly homosexual was sent to the concentration camps. They were forced to wear different colored labels for like their reason of being there. There were some political opponents there too, so it just depended on why you were there, and the symbol on your prison uniform basically let people know why you were there. To get to the concentration camps, they were taken there by rail car. They were usually packed in like basically cattle, usually standing room only, usually basically a bucket in the corner for the restroom that everybody used for the entire trip. Maybe you got food if a guard felt like opening the door and tossing some bread in. It wasn't unheard of for people to die on the trip, but nobody would notice until they started to get out when they arrived, because the dead bodies would be held up by the other bodies standing around. That was how tightly cramped this was. These rail cars were. Once they get into the camp, you have to be checked in. They would be forced to change into their camp uniform, and all of their personal clothing was burnt. The guards would take any valuable items that they had, any wedding rings, other personal jewelry. If they happened to some reason have still a wallet on them or something along those lines, that was taken from them. Anything that was not of value was just burnt. And their heads were shaved. So everybody had their head shaved, men, women, and children. And they received a tattoo with their identification number on usually their arm. Some, not all, but some concentration camps had dental checks, which sounds like a good thing. Oh yeah, good, they're getting dentists in there to keep their dental hygiene up. No, the dentists were there to take out any gold crowns so that they could be melted down for gold and sold. Today typically we don't use gold when you get dental crowns put in, but back then they did, and that was a value. Couldn't let them have it, so we had to extract those, and like I said, they would be melted down for gold and sold. Definitely very dehumanizing process, meant to make these people feel like animals, essentially. Concentration camps were places of death. The conditions breeded death. Very little food, very little medical care, very little decent clothing, very little shelter. All of these things obviously compounding into high numbers of death. There were also, as I said before, just basically killing machines designed to get rid of people quickly. Some common killing machines were gas chambers. Large groups would just be led into a concrete room, and the door would be shut, and they would pump poisonous gas into the room and wait for everyone to die. The responsibility of removing the bodies from the gas chamber usually fell to another prisoner at the concentration camp. And then the bodies would be cremated or sometimes buried, but usually cremated. Firing squads also were used to get rid of, murder large groups of people. They would basically order a large group of people to dig a big pit, like a long rectangular pit, and then they would stand at the edge of it, and then they would just shoot at them, and they would fall back into the pit they've just dug, and then they would just cover them up. Sometimes they would use the same pit for multiple rounds of firing squads before they would bury the bodies. If I remember correctly, I believe I have pictures on the next slide. I can't exactly remember. There are obviously some upsetting pictures, but I don't think it's anything that any of you aren't able to handle. But just fair warning. Oh, just kidding. They must be on the next slide. In total, throughout the Holocaust, approximately 18 million people died. Now, I'm not talking about soldiers and such. I'm talking about specifically through Hitler's final solution, his extermination of Jews and other groups that he deemed undesirable. 18 million people. Approximately about 6 million of them were Jewish, with the rest of them being comprised of Russian prisoners of war, Polish people, like I said, elderly people, anyone openly gay, Slavic people, anybody he decided was not desirable. When Allied armies liberated or freed these camps in 1945 and 1944, as we kind of near the end of the war, they are absolutely shocked. In fact, the leader, the commander of the Allied forces in Europe ordered that, like, news crews, like, camera people and stuff, come with them as they liberate the camps, because he thought that nobody would believe what the people would say. That if the soldiers only told people about what they saw in the camps, that people would think that they were lying because of how horrible the conditions were. And that's why we have a lot of the photographic evidence that we have. I'm pretty sure, I'm going to look like a fool if it's not, but I'm pretty sure on the next slide are pictures. Yes. So here are some images of concentration camps being liberated. This is obviously a group of children. And then this is a group of male prisoners. You can see here just how thin these prisoners are due to malnutrition, a lack of food, and the type of clothing. They're really not in much. No shoes. I don't see a single person in shoes or socks. This just looks like a rag around his feet. So obviously conditions are very, very poor. This is a sleeping arrangement in a concentration camp. You can see there really aren't beds. It's just kind of like shelving on the wall. You can see here the men have their heads resting on, these are bowls. So you got a bowl, and then that was what you ate out of. And every time it was time for a meal, you brought your bowl with you. And if you didn't have a bowl, you didn't eat. So they're using them as pillows because they don't have a pillow. You can see it's multiple men to shelf is the best word I have for it. And you can see they're very, very, very emaciated, very, very thin. This is the gate to Auschwitz. And this is German for work makes you free. Kind of a ominous phrase. I saw a picture of somebody with this written on their sign. They were protesting opening up a state that's been kind of closed down for the virus. I'm hoping she doesn't know where this phrase comes from. Maybe she needs to do some more of her research, because I don't think that's something you really want written on a picket sign. But anyway, a lot of the concentration camps were horrifying. I mean, that's really the only word that we have. I can't think of anything other than that. We have instances of prisoners being so emaciated that Allied soldiers arriving, giving them food out of their pockets, it actually has killed them. Giving them chocolate bars would kill somebody who looks like this, literally. They were so malnourished and so starved that their stomach has actually shrunken, and their digestive system cannot handle complex carbs and sugars that come with things like chocolate bars. So anybody ever, not just in the Holocaust, but anytime ever somebody is emaciated to this degree, they actually really can't have solid foods for a while. Just kind of very, very protein rich, like broths, like beef broths and stuff, until their stomach and intestines readjust to having food. So we actually do, unfortunately, see instances of Allied soldiers just giving these people, I would give them a chocolate bar too, right? If I just stumbled into this camp and saw these people, I would give them everything in my freaking pockets. And it would unfortunately kill them. Their digestive system wouldn't be able to handle it, and they would be so emaciated that it would cause their death. Here are some examples of firing squads. You can see this man is perched at the edge, and the soldier is about to shoot him, and then this is a big rectangular pit where they have already put in bodies. And here's the dirt that they'll use to cover it up once they have finished murdering everyone. Okay. That is it for the Holocaust. We're going to move on to facts on the Japanese now. We touched on this at the end of our World War II notes about the atomic bomb, so we're going to talk about that a little bit more. Obviously, 2 atomic bombs causes havoc, chaos. Japan is a wreck after these 2 atomic bombs, and is really in need of help. The United States steps in and helps them rebuild and set up a democratic government and a constitution modeled on the United States Constitution. Now, this sounds, so nice of us, right? Oh, look at us, United States, saving Japan. It's probably a combination of guilt, right? We just basically, in the span of 4 days, killed like 200,000 people. That's probably a pretty influential factor as to why we feel like we should step in and help and rebuild. It's also because Japan is severely war-torn at this point. And they are very close by to Russia, who is our friend technically, sort of. Not really, but kind of. And Russia is communist. And we are afraid that Russia is going to influence Japan and Japan will become communist. Can't have that. Additionally, very, very shortly after World War II, China converts to communism, again, very close to Japan. So we're really afraid that Japan is going to become communist. So we have to swoop in really quick and make sure that the new government they set up is a democratic one. A kind of really important part of Japan's culture is their emperor. They still have an emperor today. He doesn't have any power. He's ceremonial, which means he just kind of waves and, comes out and cheers people on and stuff. You know what I mean? Just like a figurehead. It doesn't really make any decisions. They have an elected government, and like I said, it is modeled on the United States government. We have a pretty decent trading relationship with them today. Today, we're really strong allies and trade partners, and I can't remember which president did it, but I'm pretty sure that we have officially apologized for using the atomic bomb, and they, in return, have officially apologized for Pearl Harbor. So, kind of a weird, unexpected friendship here, because I feel like, if we had stopped saying, oh yeah, and then we murdered 200,000 Japanese people by dropping the 2 atomic bombs, if I had asked you to guess what's our relationship with Japan today, I think a lot of you might have said, we probably don't get along. But we do, actually. We're pretty strong allies and trade partners. So that's a positive thing. That's a nice thing, I guess. Okay. Let's talk about Japanese Americans. So, American citizens of Japanese descent. So, during during World War II in the United States, unfortunately, many Japanese Americans were treated very poorly during World War II. A lot of people uh, were very prejudiced towards Japanese Americans because they saw them as like spies, right? Oh, those Japanese people over there are bad, so you must be bad too. And just being in general very racially prejudicial towards people of Japanese descent. And honestly, it probably extended to anybody who was Asian, because if you just, I mean, I doubt people were like really like, oh, are you of Japanese descent? Okay, I don't like you, right? They probably just were just generally racist to anybody who kind of looked Asian, unfortunately. We see this most on the West Coast because that's where most of our Japanese American immigrants were living, because that's the side of the United States that's closest to Japan. Geographically, it makes the most sense. Kind of an interesting thing that we tend to skip over in United States history, but is true. During World War II, Japanese Americans were actually removed from their home and forced to live in internment camps with other Japanese Americans. This is true. A lot of people don't believe me when I teach this, but it is true. They were usually notified with only a day or two that they needed to pack up, that they probably wouldn't be coming home for a long time, a couple of years at least. If they needed to sell any of their belongings, they had only a few days to do so, and therefore probably lost a lot of money because they were so focused on selling it quickly, not for selling what it's worth. And like I said, businesses had to close, Japanese American businesses had to close, and they were forced to move into camps with other Japanese people. While they were kidnapped, stolen, held hostage, I'm not sure the term I should use there. While they were away, many of their homes and businesses were looted, people stole from them. If it was something that could be taken, it probably was, and a lot of property damage as well. Now, these internment camps were not places of death like concentration camps were, okay? While it still wasn't an okay thing to do, there is not the large-scale death that we see in concentration camps. In fact, we don't even see medium-scale death. In concentration camps, large numbers of prisoners were systematically murdered, either through, methods of killing like gas chambers, like firing squads, or just systematically killed through starvation and malnutrition and lack of medical care. In internment camps, they received food, they received proper and adequate clothing, they received adequate shelter, they weren't typically forced to work. So like I said, I'm not saying that they're an okay thing to do. By no means is it okay to take somebody from their home and force them to go somewhere else because of their ethnicity that you don't trust. In no way is that an okay thing, but these are not places of death. These are not systematic killing camps. The United States government did officially apologize in the 1980s and paid reparations, there's our word again, paid reparations to Japanese American families for the loss of property that they sustained during these internment camps. As you can see here, this was a old slur, kind of a rude, common but rude term to describe people of Japanese American descent, right? And she's got signs over here too. Oh, she really feeling some type of way, jerk. And then this is an image of a dining hall in an internment camp. So you can see here, families are together. Everybody looks relatively well dressed and well put together. They've got tablecloths and silverware and quite a bit of food on their plates and stuff. So that's one of our major differences between our internment camps and our concentration camps. Neither of which okay, but internment camps, not places of death. Concentration camps, places of large-scale death. Okay? Despite all of this, many Japanese Americans actually go on to serve in the army during World War II. They were forced to serve in segregated units, so units of only Japanese American soldiers. This is true also for black soldiers as well. Our Japanese American units were called the Nisei regiments, and they were actually incredibly well decorated. They had many, many medals and honors for bravery and service throughout World War II. And that's probably because they felt like they really had to fight harder to prove that they were, loyal to America, that they weren't, spies or whatever. I don't even know. But, yeah. Okay. Speaking of black Americans and black soldiers, we see many black Americans fight in the United States Army as well during World War II, also in segregated units, troops of only black soldiers. Typically, with our segregated units, we see that their commanding officer is usually white. That changes later on, but in the earlier years, that is the case. And again, many black American segregated units served with great honor. One of our more famous, more decorated segregated units, black units, are the Tuskegee Airmen. I think they made a movie about them. I haven't seen it yet. Maybe I'll add it to my isolation movie list. But the Tuskegee Airmen were a regiment of black fighter pilots, and they were very well decorated, and they had many, many, many brave victories, cool battles, and stuff. I have a picture of them. Here they are, okay, in their little fighter pilot jackets and the little fighter pilot helmets and stuff. The question I always get, some of these people look white. I don't know what to tell you, mate. It's a black and white picture. This is a black, they're all black here. So, I don't know. That's just the way it is. Okay? Awesome. All right, let's talk about women. We see this during World War I as well. Men are away fighting. We still have jobs that need to be completed, especially in factories producing weaponry and uniforms and other things that the military needs. So women take these jobs to continue to keep the country running. A really famous piece of propaganda encouraging women to fight for this war effort was Rosie the Riveter. I'm sure you've seen her. I have a picture included, but I'm sure you know already who I'm talking about. And she was just really motivating for women to be strong at home. Many women during this time start to wear short hair and pants. Scandal. People working in factory jobs need to be safe. And long hair and flowy skirts are the opposite of that, because those things get caught in machines, tangled in this and that, and can be very dangerous around factory machinery. So we see women wear their hair short or wear their hair up, sometimes in a bandana or some other, updo kind of thing, as well as pants, overall suits and coverall suits, and jeans. Oh my goodness. Women in pants? What? After the kind of flapper movement, it's not like so crazy for women to have short hair and wear pants, but it becomes much more normalized. It's not like, oh, look at that flapper over there wearing pantaloons. It was a little bit more normal to see women in pants. Something different about World War I. After World War II, we see actually an increase in women with jobs. Women don't necessarily leave their job when the men come home, or if they do, they go out and get another one. Women kind of move into becoming earners. They like earning their money. I like earning their own money. Payday is one of my favorite days of the month. I like my job. I like earning my own money. I like being able to, spend that money on that McDonald's delivery when I want to, when I feel like it, because it's my own money. I earned it. And a lot of people feel this way. Women keep jobs for other reasons as well. And we see an increase in working women as the years go on. there's Rosie. Okay, this is the Rosie the Riveter propaganda. Okay, and you can see she's got work coveralls on. That's what that is. And she's showing her strength. She's like, we can do it. Yes, Rosie. Up here you can see members of the army. Actually, these are nurses, and I believe they are black nurses as well, which is cool. I don't know where I was going with that sentence. Women are able to join the army. They are not in combat positions. So they serve primarily as nurses in hospitals, army hospitals and such. But there they are in their uniforms and they're being inspected. Fancy army stuff. Okay. Women also deal with most of the rationing of the war. We see a huge increase in rationing during World War II. What is rationing? Rationing is limiting how much you use of something in order to save it. In this case, non-military personnel, people who were at home during World War II, rationed products so that they could be saved for soldiers serving. You can also ration things yourself, right? If I want to make sure that I have enough rice to last me, 2 weeks, I can ration that on my own. We also see different types of rationing. During World War II, we have government mandated rationing. I mean, the government says you can only get this much of this a week or a month because the rest of it is going to the military. And we ended up rationing a bunch of stuff. Different types of fabric, meat, metal, gas, sugar, all kinds of stuff. They would have big recycling drives. Little kids would go around and collect scrap metal and stuff that would be given to be recycled and turned into, tank parts and airplane parts and stuff. Obviously, gasoline needed to be saved so that military vehicles and tanks and stuff had enough gasoline to be able to travel. Meat, that one's pretty straightforward. We got to feed them. Soldiers got to eat. Fabric was used for not only uniforms, but also things like supply packages, right? Like army backpacks where you carry all your stuff. Parachutes, okay? During this time, women actually stopped wearing stockings, right? Not like pantyhose, like nylon pantyhose, because the nylon was used in things like parachutes. So we see a decrease in women wearing pantyhose. Skirts also get a little bit shorter during this time period because fabric was rationed. So skirts were shorter and didn't have as much like swing to it. Like when you spin, it didn't, flow as much. All because we were rationing things. And people got ration cards. Here are two examples of ration cards. There are two types. There was a punch ration card, and there was like a tearaway ration card. So this is a tearaway ration card. So each of these boxes at the bottom represents 1 unit of gasoline, probably a gallon. Excuse me. And you could use this whenever you wanted, right? If you wanted to go to the gasoline place and use all 7 of your units, you could do that. But then you're not getting gasoline until the next ration card comes out. Okay, whenever that may be, probably a month, right? If you wanted to use 3 and then save the other 4 for later, just in case, you could do that too. If you wanted to do 1 a week, you could do that too. When you use them, you tore them away, turned them in. You would get a new ration card, like I said. Depending on what the item was, it could be once a week, it could be once a month, it could be once every 4 months, it depended. This is a punch ration card. You can see that this has been punched. All right, and this is for sugar. And you would put your name on it. Oh, I just noticed that has my name on it. I have had this picture on this slide for 2 years. And I have just noticed that has my name on it. Oh my God, I am shook. I cannot believe I literally just noticed that. Whew, I gotta put my head back on. Oh my goodness. Anyway, this is a punch ration card, so it's for sugar. So you would go into the grocery store with your, I can't believe this has my name on it. You would go into the grocery store with your ration card and pick up however many you needed, and they would punch how much sugar you got. So see how 1 sugar over here, got 4 sugars over here, or whatever. Again, usually you could use them however you wanted. If you wanted to buy all the sugar at once, you could. That was probably a bad idea because sugar does spoil or get bugs in it or stuff. But that's how the ration card works. So you still had to pay for it. It wasn't free with the ration card. It just limited how much you could buy. Okay, let's talk about the Germans. This is the part that gets the weirdest. Wow, I can't believe that had my name on it. That's crazy. Okay, after the war, things are messy for Germans. We obviously can't let these Nazis get away with what they did, so we do put them on trial. These are called the Nuremberg trials because they were held in Nuremberg, Germany. And German leaders and, well, at the Nuremberg trials, German leaders were tried. There were separate trials in Tokyo, in Japan, for war crimes committed against, by the Japanese. Hi, baby. Hi, Noodle. I know. And they were tried for various types of crimes. Especially the Nazis, many of the Nazis just kind of said, oh, I was afraid they would kill me. I had to do it, or else they would kill me. And most of the juries on the Nuremberg trials did not take that as an excuse. And they were often sentenced to death, either by hanging or by... I don't think anybody got a firing squad. I think it was just hanging or life imprisonment. I think those were like the big common punishments. So many of these war criminals, did face punishment for what they had done. The Allied powers took control over the country of Germany after the war to help it recover. Luckily, not many times in history we can say this, luckily, we had some hindsight and said, you know what? Yeah, maybe we shouldn't have done what we done after World War I because that brought us Hitler, Noodle. Let's not do that again. And so the Allied powers make serious steps to prevent the kind of circumstances from after World War I. Here's what we do. We split Germany into 4 pieces, okay? Each of the Allied powers took control of a piece. An American piece, a British piece, a French piece, and a Russian piece. The capital city of Berlin was also split into 4 pieces. The city of Berlin was really solidly into Russia's section of Germany, but they split it anyway because you didn't want any one country to have too much power over a capital city. So the city of Berlin was split into 4 pieces: a Russian piece, Russian piece, an American piece, a French piece, and a British piece. If you think this sounds like a mess, you're right. Here's what it looks like, okay? So you've got the British piece, the French piece, the American piece, and the Russian piece. And then here's Berlin, right? So you can see it's pretty solidly into the Russian section. And that was split into a Russian section, an American section, a British section, and a French section. Again, if you think this sounds like a mess, you're right. In the western sections of Germany and Berlin, in the American, French, and British sections, we set up democratic governments because we are democratic countries. Well, in the Russian sections in East Germany and East Berlin, the Soviet Union, which is what Russia's official name is, they're communist. So they set up communist governments. Yikes. So half of Germany and half of its capital city are democratic, and the other half of Germany and the other half of its capital city are communist. Yikes. And that is where I leave you. We will talk more about the problems of this and all the things that it causes in our next set of notes, beginning the Cold War. Bum, bum, bum. Bye.